You're listening to Football, Philosophy, and Rocket Science, a Cleveland Browns podcast, a show where a philosopher and a rocket scientist try to make sense of the Cleveland Browns. The Football, Philosophy, and Rocket Science podcast is a part of the Fanatical Elves podcast network, a part of the Fans First Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Elliot Kennel and Joel Cade.
Hi, and welcome to Football, Philosophy, and Rocket Scientists. He is the left guard, Dr. Joel Cade, philosophy professor at the Left Guard. I'm the Village Elliot at TH Village Elliot. Together, we hope to offer unique perspectives on the hardest game in the universe, NFL football, and the strangest team to ever attempt to play at the Cleveland Browns. We do not claim to be the best analysts in the land, nor do we claim to follow the best team in football by a long shot, but we are absolutely unique. And we really are, or Joel really is, a PhD in philosophy, and I really am a former Air Force specialist in space power and propulsion at beautiful Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, home of the deadliest fighting force in the world. And today we have some interesting agenda items to talk about. We're going to start talking about the salary cap friendliness of the Cleveland Browns offense, the famous Stefanski offense, which I like, which Joel likes, and probably 90% of the fan base absolutely despises. And we're going to talk about how that might lead some credence to the otherwise inexplicable rumor that the Browns might be signing Ezekiel Elliott to a contract for the Cleveland Browns. And then speaking of contracts, we heard that there's some rumors that the Pittsburgh Steelers, or I guess they have signed a third-string quarterback. We'll tell you about that and how that may compare and contrast to the quarterback philosophy of the Cleveland Browns. But first, okay, let's go. Let's ask, do we have any fan mail this week? We haven't had fan letters for a while, so we must have accumulated something, Joel.
I think we've got a couple pieces of fan mail here.
Okay.
All right, let me see what we got. We got one from Huggin Hugh from Grambling, Louisiana. And Huggin Hugh writes, "Nice show, Joel and Elliot. But what the Browns lack is a strong attachment to their players. And it all starts with their coach, in my view, Stefanski. In addition to being a terrible play caller, is too wooden and unfriendly. Of course, no one wants to hug the quarterback, for obvious reasons. The Browns need a quarterback as well as a coach who is huggable. The Browns had that a few years ago, but they let it all slip away. Yours truly, Huggin Hugh." Well, thank you for the letter, Huggin Hugh.
Yeah, what do you think about that? Huggin Hugh sounds like that might be Hugh Jackson. Is that possible?
Maybe. He's coming from Grambling, Louisiana, but I mean, quarterbacks need hugs too, man. Like they sometimes get hit, and
Baker Mayfield did not need no hugs. That was clear. He made that very clear. And
no hugs for Hugh.
But yeah, we wish Hugh Jackson well. I think he did get a raw deal in Cleveland, that's for sure. And I think he did make a mistake in trying to remain personal friends with the team after he left and joined immediately a division rival. And in football, you just can't really let personal friendships transcend division rivalries. Those, we don't want those to be too friendly. We want those to be kind of bitter, I think.
I want you to clarify something for me, Elliot. How did Hugh Jackson get a raw deal in Cleveland? Is that what you said? Is that what you meant to say, that Hugh Jackson got a raw deal in Cleveland?
Yeah, no, I do think he got a raw deal in the sense that the Browns were in a rebuilding period, and they did not draft the best teams to the maximum extent that they could have. They deliberately depleted the roster of veterans, cleared salary cap room, and stockpiled draft picks. And so they did not give him the most talent that they could have. Now, I believe that was the right move in general by Sashi Brown. I am an advocate of the techniques that he used. I think he went too extreme in some cases and made moves that were actually not good football moves in order to save a small amount of money. He really gouged the team of some important character pieces, namely Joe Hayden. I don't think he should have cut Joe Hayden the way he did, and with so much money wasted and given him to the Pittsburgh Steelers, essentially. That was a mistake that a team just can't do that, cannot gift wrap a capable player to a division rival like that. I think that was a appalling football mistake, and he saved like $4 million by doing that. It was not worth it. That was a terrible mistake. But in general, I think Sashi Brown made the correct football move, but it worked against the ability of the coach to field the best team. That's what I mean.
Okay. So you're feeling like he got the raw deal because he wasn't handed, talent at the level that other NFL teams were being handled. So because the Browns were basically tanking.
Yeah, I think that they should have kept one veteran quarterback rather than stocking the roster with three young quarterbacks. I think the oldest in point of service was Cody. Help me out, Cody Kessler.
Cody Kessler.
Mm-hmm. He was in his second year, and they decided not to play him because he was too old. That was a mistake. They should have kept somebody that was a veteran. Probably Brock Osweiler. I think Brock was not a great quarterback, but they should not have allowed the team to go 0-16. That was appalling. It was not necessary.
Well, I think there was some coaching, like to go 0 and whatever in the NFL takes a couple things. One, some really bad coaching. Two, some really bad luck. And three, some really bad players. Now, somehow in the NFL at that time, where the NFL is built to be a completely, what's what I'm looking for, equally balanced system. They'd work very hard to have a competitive balanced system, which generally works. They somehow managed to have a vacuum of talent on the team. And I do think that hurt Hugh Jackson, but there were winnable games in that process. And there were some inexplicably dumb things done by the head coach. Yes. So I think 0-16 was a group effort.
Yeah, it was. True.
All right. We do have another male fan mail here.
Okay, excellent.
It says, there's no who it's from. So, dear boys, we saw your video about Elliot having a date with a Cincinnati Bengals cheerleader back in the day. See, I told you, you're the most interesting man in the world. Hey, why don't you stay on your own turf? Oh, that's right. There are no Cleveland Browns cheerleaders. Why is that? Did all the attractive candidates move to Baltimore with Art Modell? I'm not liking this person.
Not liking this.
Better luck with the next team, boys. Yours truly, the Cincinnati Bengals cheerleaders. Oh, this is from the cheerleaders.
Oh, man, that's rough. Oh. Yeah, well.
So clearly you made quite an impression because it, upset all the other cheerleaders.
Well, yeah, cheerleaders, they're easily upset. I found that out. But
you're a wanted man, Elliot. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing.
Probably not wanted that, but yeah. Well, actually, the Browns did have cheerleaders one season. In the early 1970s, they did have cheerleaders, and they didn't do very much. I think they were from a local high school, if I'm not mistaken, and they wrapped them up in a nice warm cheerleaders uniform. And nobody really noticed them very much, and they were gone after one season. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that they were so forgettable that the owner of the Cleveland Browns, whose name escapes me at the moment, even forgot that they were ever part of the team.
Art Modell?
I wasn't going to remember that.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
But you can go to hold on. You can go to my Twitter page. Check on my pinned Twitter tweets about my feelings about Art Modell.
Yeah, well,
anyway, at the left guard.
His wife had to remind him that they had cheerleaders that one season in the early 1970s.
Wow,
and it was that forgettable. Even the famous man forgot about it. But okay, yeah, well, I don't know.
Well,
I like cheerleaders. They ought to find some way to bring them back. I
well,
would
we've
go.
got some we've got some more fan mail. Let's see what else we got here.
Okay.
Double G from Excelsior Springs, Missouri writes, "Dang, Joel and Elliot, is that even your real name, by the way? You guys know a thing or two about football, but I have 16,442 defensive formations in my playbook. And you know what? You can blitz from each formation. Is that the key to success? The Browns need to blitz more. Blitz on every down. The NFL is so boring. If you want to watch exciting football, watch the exciting football on XFL, like the Washington Defenders. Now there is some intelligent football. None of this is mamby-bamby cover 2 baloney. Get after the passer. Bring 5, bring 6, bring 7. Heck, I don't care. Bring all 11. Rush the quarterback."
Oh yeah, that was really. If anybody saw that, if anybody watched the XFL, maybe I was the only one, but our former head coach and defensive coordinator Greg Williams came out of retirement and was the defensive coordinator for the Washington Defenders, and that's what he did. he blitzed on every down.
Did it work for him?
Well, it did, except that the championship game, they played a team that snuck into the playoffs with a losing record, and then they suddenly became unbeatable in the playoffs.
Okay.
And the quarterback was Jordan Teamu. Do you remember him?
No.
He was in one of the what do you call it? The professional leagues, alternate leagues previously, and made it back to the NFL, and now he's in the XFL. But the key thing is that he's a mobile quarterback, and they couldn't catch him.
So when they blitzed, he scrambled.
Yeah, he scrambled away, and so there they were with blitzing on every play, and he just ate up the 8 and 9 man front every play. And Jordan Teamu was like Johnny Unitas, man. He just completed every pass, and the defenders blew it on the championship game because the defense, you live by the sword and you die by the sword. But man, it was fun to see Greg Williams back in action. I really liked that.
Was he playing that like angel in the outfield defense?
Man, I don't know that they had anybody covering the receivers at all. They were all blitzing. Everybody.
So
blitzing.
this is like the Buddy Ryan defense then.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that he might have started his career with Buddy Ryan.
That'll be something we'll have to look up. I know.
We'll have to look that
I know
up.
Double G never really ran the 46 because teams figured out if you ran a pitch to the backside of the 46 that you're screwed. So they kind of just made the 46 a specialty kind of defense.
Yeah, they just about knocked out Jim McMahon after a while.
Yeah. All right, so let's switch gears here, Elliot. Let's go to the offensive cap numbers.
Let's talk about the offensive cap and why the Stefanski offense is so interesting from a cap perspective. In the NFL today, it's not just about having the world's greatest team and lining up our guys and being better than your guys. Really, everybody knows that the league is a passing league, and therefore it's a receiving league. I don't think that's any great mystery.
Right.
And so what you like to do, and especially if you play fantasy football, is you load up on the best quarterback you can find, and you get the best wide receivers you can find, and that's how you score fantasy points, right? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like that in the NFL also, except that you actually have to pay these guys. And in order to survive the salary cap, you have to manage your investments. And these wide receivers make a lot of money. And if you want to have, like the old St. Louis Rams offense where you have 4 wide receivers that can really go after the ball, you can't afford to pay 4 wide receivers and have also Marshall Faulk in your backfield. That's
So
very
you're talking
hard.
about the greatest show on turf offense, right?
Greatest
Kurt
show on
Warner.
turf offense.
Okay.
It's a fantastic offense, and it's also unaffordable in today's NFL. So if you could figure out a way to, maybe do that on all rookie contracts, it might be a very effective offense. But in general,
let me interject for a second. I think that's what the Bengals are doing right now. They got Burrow, Higgins.
Yes.
I think their whole wide receiver crew is on rookie contracts.
Yeah. Right now, they're really in Fat City, and they're going to be very, very tough this season because they are on rookie contracts, and it is not a salary cap friendly offense in general. Mm-hmm. But because they managed to get everybody all at one time somehow, they're really a threat, and it can really work for them very well.
So what does it say about Stefanski's offense?
Okay. In general, what Stefanski likes to do, and correct me if you think otherwise, but he likes to play an extra tight end, so line up with 2 tight ends. And oftentimes he likes to line up with a fullback. And all right, now people don't really like fullbacks that much. You say, "Oh man, this is modern day NFL. Who likes fullbacks?" And we don't even really like running backs that much. There's a considerable school of thought that says you should never draft fullbacks halfbacks, running backs, tailbacks. You should never draft the guy in the first round. Like in 2018, the Giants got all kinds of flack for drafting Saquon Barkley in the first round, and perhaps that's rightly so, even though there was no question that he was one of the probably 2 or 3 best running backs in the land. I kind of like Nick Chubb for reasons we'll get into in a little bit later. But
I will say I did write an article before that draft saying that Nick Chubb was the best running back in the class, and that Saquon Barkley is going to have to reinvent his game to be successful in the NFL, and that's what he had to do in New York. He had to reinvent his entire game, and now I think they're trying to extend him. So,
yeah, well,
the New York Giants, man.
My theory about the running game is that what you want to do with the running game in today's NFL is you want to win between the tackles. You want to be the absolute best short yardage offense that you can be, because the passing game has the job of making 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 yards, not the running game in today's NFL. So, there are easier ways to make 7 yards than to do it on the ground. So the fact that Saquon Barkley is a great breakaway runner is true, but it may not be as valuable as you think. It's really spectacular for the fans, but there are other ways to make 7 yards. So, but anyway, so I liked Nick Chubb on the grounds that he was much better running up the middle, and he was going to get you that 1 yard on 4th down that you needed more reliably than Saquon Barkley. And so I liked him better. And I think I also wrote an article to the same to that same point. And that's why I'm also very excited about having a right tackle or an extra lineman that you can put in that weighs 375 pounds. I think that's a great concept. And I also like the fact that you have a fullback. The Browns use extra offensive linemen as fullbacks. And so all of a sudden we have these 300-pound guys that play fullback and 375-pound extra linemen that really allow them to be incredibly tough on short yardage situations with Nick Chubb to carry the rock. And that's my idea of what the running game is supposed to be, is be absolutely the best short yardage offense in the NFL. That's what I want to have. So why is that so great? Well, because it's cheaper to pay Nick Chubb than it is to pay Odell Beckham Jr. When I don't know what the maximum salary is for wide receiver, but the cap hit, I would guess, is probably, I should look it up, but it's probably like $25 million or something like that. And Nick Chubb is probably something a little bit more than half of that. That's what it means to be cap friendly, is that for whatever reason, the pay scale favors the running back. The tight ends are getting to be pretty pricey these days. Tight ends can block.
Some of them can.
Some of the ones at the high end of the pay scale obviously can, and but yet they're not as expensive as wide receivers. You're better off investing in tight ends than you are in wide receivers. So if you go 2 tight ends and wide receiver, that's better than having 3 wide receivers and a tight end. And certainly if you're getting mileage from a fullback, a really good fullback, is somebody that you might pay $2 million for. And, if that's substituting for a number 4 wide receiver, that guy might be a $6 million guy. Mm-hmm. And your fullback, you might really be a devastating guy, and your opposing defenses may not be prepared to stop him because they're all geared up to stop 4 wide receivers, multiple wide receiver sets. So that's why the layout or the, I don't know what to call it, but the makeup of the Stefanski offense is really salary cap friendly. And
in a way, it's like it's going counter what the NFL is paying for, right? So the NFL is paying for the receivers. You're paying for the quarterback. You're paying for the tight ends to run and catch passes because, as you said, these are the ones who are getting you your yards. So if the Stefanski offense, which is really this Kyle Shanahan kind of San Francisco 49ers style offense, where you've got the fullback, you've got the running back, you got tight ends that block, it becomes cheaper, in your opinion, to run this style of offense. That's your argument, right?
You obtain quality for a lower price. I still want to throw the ball. I'm if you have the quarterback, if you have a guy like Deshaun Watson, you still should be throwing the ball more than you run it, but you might be throwing it in a different way rather than throwing the long ball, like to Jamar Chase, or like the Bengals do. You might be throwing it to, let's say, Njoku. You might be throwing it to Nick Chubb as a way of, getting ground control, grinded out kind of offense, but doing it through the air rather than with a long ball like the Bengals might be doing.
Right. But, I think it'll be interesting coming up this next season because, they brought in, I can't even think of his name, the guy they just brought in to help with the offense, who runs a lot of multiple option RPOs, read option kind of stuff offense. And you wonder if the Browns offense is going to look like that outside zone stuff. They brought in a lot of receivers over the last year, and you wonder if they're going to put 2 tight ends on the field when they have 3-4 wide receivers that are viable options to put on the field, and if they're not going to try some kind of I can't think of the guy in Cincinnati, Joe Burrow, Zach, I can't think of his head coach's name. Zach Taylor, who comes out of that same kind of outside zone offense that basically said, hey, we got a quarterback, we're going to throw it all over the yard. You wonder if the Browns are going to try that this year. They're going to try to throw it all over the yard. So I don't know.
At times, but they I think will be based off of a quarterback option concept where
and you could run that whole zone read offense or the whole outside zone offense through shotgun if they wanted to, and put read options off of it, which a lot of teams do. So, Elliot, we're up on a commercial break here. So let's take our commercial break, and when we come back, let's talk about Ezekiel Elliott.
Let's do that.
All right, so we're going to commercial break, guys. Hang on. When we come back, we'll talk about Ezekiel Elliott. All right, Elliot, we're back. Thanks for hanging on, guys, through the break. Elliot has some news about Ezekiel Elliott, his namesake.
Yeah, there you go. Well, yeah, just in case.
Well, I guess I got a question. Has Ezekiel Elliott dated a Bengals cheerleader?
That I don't know. I'll have to ask him. But this has been suggested by every team in the NFL that, my team might be trying to sign Ezekiel Elliott. So, this is not a new rumor, but what maybe gives it additional oomph is that it appeared recently in an article by Sports Illustrated. Now, normally you would probably just trash this rumor because it doesn't really make that much sense. Why? Well, because the Browns have Nick Chubb. So why would the Browns want to have Ezekiel Elliott? But I'll give you a reason why, and it's based on what we've been talking about just now. The Browns, first of all, don't have Kareem Hunt. And we always like to have, especially when the Browns were not, when the Browns were struggling at quarterback, there was an advocacy that we should have Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb in the same backfield. But let's ask ourselves, well, how would you do that? What would you do if you had both Hunt and Chubb in the backfield together, which the Browns actually did very well in 2019? And the answer is that one of those guys has to play slot receiver and the other guy is at running back, and then you switch them back and forth. And that's what we did with the Todd Monken offense. And in that case, Nick Chubb had a lot of pass receptions, and so did Kareem Hunt. But I'll tell you what, Kareem Hunt is not a fullback, and he's never going to be a fullback. He's not going to, really be blocking that well. Well, I don't mean to say he's a bad blocker, but that's not really his forte. But if you had Ezekiel Elliott in the same backfield with Nick Chubb, how would you use Ezekiel Elliott? And I think that Ezekiel Elliott would be an awesome blocking back, as well as still being a threat to receive the ball. He's not as elusive as Kareem Hunt, but I think it would make a lot of sense to use him as a pass receiving fullback in the back.
So you would line him up as a fullback?
I would, with Nick Chubb in the same backfield, absolutely.
So I think Ezekiel Elliott would make more sense if you were going to come to the Browns. I'm not sure I'm on board with something like this, but if Ezekiel Elliott would be signed by the Browns, he would make more sense as a third down back like Kareem Hunt was, like his role. You come on the field at third down, you're either in there in the pocket blocking for the quarterback, or you're doing kind of little flare routes or dump off routes, because Ezekiel Elliott can catch the football and he can block. Those are his strengths. His strength is no longer running up the middle and bowling over people. Yeah, like a fullback does. I don't think he does that anymore. I think he's done that in his career. He's gotten beaten up, and he's losing a step, and he's losing some power. But put him out on a route, he might be able to win one-on-one, run over somebody one-on-one after catching the ball. So there might be some value there, but you can't expect Ezekiel Elliott to show up and be the Ezekiel Elliott of Ohio State playing in Cleveland. Because if he was, he'd still be in Dallas.
No, but look at what Deshaun Watson did a few years ago, where he had Duke Johnson and Carlos Hyde. Those guys were rags. Well, I shouldn't say they were rags, but they were not nearly as effective in Cleveland. They both went to Houston, and they played with Deshaun Watson, and they had like 1,700 yards of offense. Playing with Deshaun Watson. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Carlos Hyde had 1,000 yards rushing, didn't he?
I have no idea. I don't pay attention to Houston Texans.
No, I mean, it was unbelievable how good they were. I mean,
funny. It's funny when you have a quarterback that can throw, and all of a sudden you're interested in stopping the pass because you can throw it to DeAndre Hopkins. Now you're concerned about stopping that end. You're pulling a safety out of the box. So if you can get numbers in the box versus your opponent, then someone like Carlos Hyde could rush for 1,000 yards. Elliot, you're making the point that you shouldn't sign a running back to a second contract because you don't need to pay somebody $5 million when you can get somebody on a rookie contract to do the same thing.
No, but that wasn't rookie contracts. Those were both
retreads
contracts, and they were outstanding with Deshaun Watson. Let's see, that was 2019, and those dudes. Let's see, let me just look it up. Okay, rushing and receiving. Duke Johnson. Okay, all right.
When he wasn't hurt.
I undersold him. Excuse me. I beg your pardon. Duke Johnson had 820 total yards from scrimmage. 820. Carlos Hyde had 1,112 yards from scrimmage, and including over 1,000 yards rushing. So together, that was 1,932 yards from scrimmage between two backs that the Cleveland Browns didn't even want.
So that's
yards from scrimmage.
That's Duke Johnson. Is that Duke Johnson as the third down back and Carlos Hyde as the first and second down back? That's what that sounds like.
They were in the game a lot together.
Okay.
And, Duke Johnson was sort of the big guy that either toted the rock or he blocked for Duke. And then Duke also, he, made those little chip blocks for Carlos Hyde, too, and just slowed people down enough that Carlos Hyde got open, and they were very, very effective. And then Deshaun Watson was Deshaun Watson. And so everybody was great together. Deshaun Watson had 3,800 yards passing and also contributed another 400 yards rushing. So it all worked together very well. They had two running backs that were on the field together a lot. And I think let's see, who did they have to catch the ball? I think that they had, they had DeAndre Hopkins, who had over 1,000 yards, and Will Fuller.
Jordan
Will
Fuller was the deep threat.
Fuller had 670 yards. Kenny Stills, and they had two tight ends. They used the two tight end offense with Jordan Akins and Darren Fells, another former Cleveland Browns. They had 25 starts between them, which means, in other words, that they were running the two tight end offense at least. Let's see. Let me take this back.
That was the model. That was the model under. I can't think of his name, but it's the same model they ran in New England with Tom Brady. When you've got the two tight ends that
O'Brien was the head coach. Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, Bill O'Brien system.
Not the greatest general manager, but I think he's a really good offensive mind. And so the tight ends combined for 14, 15. Okay, they had 16. 25, 26. They had 27 total starts. So they had two tight ends start the game more often than not.
Right. And that's so that offense was predicated upon the gadget player, as opposed to, say, like Deebo Samuel or somebody as a gadget player. The gadget player was the tight end. If you could get the tight end to catch passes, block, and be a fullback, and then you had two of those kind of people, as you could get into all kinds of different formations where you could have those tight ends be wide receivers, then they're running wide receiver routes. Had those tight ends be blockers, inline blockers, then you have extra linemen. That multiplicity is what the Belichick offense is about. It's being able to put two tight ends on the field, forcing the defense to put a package to match the two tight ends, then spread them out as wide receivers and have these big giant tight ends on tiny corners or linebackers that they can go out and outrun. So that I want to support your argument by saying that the tight end situation there was unique in that they used them as wide receivers, and they used their running backs as fullbacks and halfbacks both.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if the Browns run that same style of offense, but I could see how, you could save some money on the cap room that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, Ezekiel Elliott would not be cheap. He would be one of the most expensive. If I called him a fullback, he would be in the upper, let's say, five fullbacks in the NFL, because there's probably only like even like 8 fullbacks total in the
I think the 49ers and the Ravens have fullbacks.
Yeah, well, those guys are like $6 and $4 million a year, respectively. So, but yeah,
Let's
would be like a hybrid. He could be either position, and he would not be full time. I think he's past the point where he would be an every down back anyway.
Yeah, you'd have to use them sparingly. Let's move on to our next topic here. Mason Rudolph has re-signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I'm going to start off on this one because I think this is just absolutely pointless. I don't even understand why it's news. The Steelers are committed to Kenny Pickett. They've got Mitch Trubisky as the backup. But Trubisky, for whatever he's going to do, he's going to try to mentor Kenny Pickett. They just signed an undrafted free agent, so Mason Rudolph is basically there to, compete with the undrafted free agent to see who gets to be the third quarterback. I don't understand why this is news, except there's no NFL news going on.
Well, I don't know. I don't think it's a surprise. I don't think that it is a shock in any kind of sense. But the Steelers always sign 3 good quarterbacks. They always do every year. I really like Mason Rudolph. I think he's a good quarterback. I signed him for the Browns, except that he doesn't get along with Myles Garrett, who's our
let's interject this for a second. Mason Rudolph, by the way, who we're talking about, is the guy that Myles Garrett hit over the head with a helmet. And there's been some, controversy over what was said, what was not said.
Swing at him, whiffed actually, but they did get.
No, I think.
Right?
But I don't think this was the whole controversy. He was indefinitely suspended from the NFL. Then, of course, there's Aaron Donald double fisting helmets against Bengals players, and nobody said a word. But I digress.
Yeah, no, I think that I really think that that game was very unfortunate. I think the Browns were. My sense was that even before that happened, that the coaching staff allowed the Browns to get out of control in trying to play like the 1970s Oakland Raiders. It was a mistake, and that they were just too rowdy and undisciplined, and the coaching staff was at fault, I believe. They contributed mightily to the atmosphere that led to that confrontation, and it was just bad all the way around. And I think contributed to Mason Rudolph losing his starting job.
Well, I think there's some stuff that we're not being told. I don't want to get into the whole thing, but the Steelers have re-signed him, right?
Yeah,
and I don't. I mean, they've got an undrafted free agent. They've got 4 camp arms. Well, I'm not sure what Mason Rudolph is about.
No, Mason Rudolph will make the roster. He's fine. The undrafted free agent, they'll cut. He will clear waivers, and they'll keep him on the practice squad for a while.
Probably.
It's a perfectly fine plan. I think Mason Rudolph can start in the NFL. He's good enough to do that. I don't know that he's, going to make all pro. But,
so I think this is where we disagree. I don't think Mason Rudolph could start in the NFL. So I think he came out of Oklahoma State, didn't he?
Yes.
The same Brandon Weeden offense, the same air raid stuff at Oklahoma State. And I don't rant enough about the air raid offense enough, in case you haven't heard me rant about an air raid offense. The air raid offense, basically people read wide receivers. They look where corners are lined up, where the secondary is lined up. The receivers run a route based on that alignment, or how the receiver or the corner adjusts to their firing off. This is the traditional air raid system. So the quarterback is basically watching to see what the receiver does, waits for a receiver to make a move, and then once the receiver is committed to a move, throws the football. Okay? So what someone like Mason Rudolph doesn't do is throw with anticipation, because he's waiting to see what the receiver is going to do. He's been taught this since he was really little. And then you want to come to the NFL and you want to learn something completely different, where this guy's going to make a cut after 3 steps and you have to hit him on his 4th step. So when you drop back, your 3rd step, on your 3-step drop back, that ball has to be going to a spot, and you have to trust that receiver is going to be there. You have to rewire their brains from an air raid offense into a pro-style system. And I don't think that happens at the NFL level very well. The only one I've seen successfully do this is Patrick Mahomes. And Patrick Mahomes was a really, really smart student coming out of Texas Tech. So he may be an outlier. But I don't think Mason Rudolph's an outlier. I think he's just kind of like, this is what he is. He's a guy that you throw in there as a placeholder, and you hope he doesn't do anything stupid.
Yeah, well, okay, but for a 3rd-string quarterback, that's pretty good. We may never
find... That is my point, that he's not an NFL starter. Okay? You can have him as a 3rd-string quarterback. Go for it. I just don't think you're going to put him starting anywhere.
Yeah, well, okay, yeah. We the plan is that, we only see him if Mitch Trubisky gets hurt, and we only see Mitch Trubisky if Kenny Pickett gets hurt. So, I mean, what do you want really from a quarterback? But the Steelers did very well with assembling 3 quarterbacks for their quarterback room, I think. I have no complaints with what they've done. I think they're doing a pretty good job.
I just want the NFL to release the audio of what happened that night with Myles Garrett. That's all I want. I want the NFL. Their video proof of the parabolic mic pointed right at them. Then the NFL comes out and says, well, we don't keep... And Myles Garrett was mic'd up, and there was somebody else in that area that was mic'd up for like NFL films or whatever they do. And they claim that they don't have microphones on during the play, and that's why they don't have audio. The audio exists because the very next week, and they've been doing it every week since in the NFL, they come out with this mic'd up, and there's always people talking in the middle of a play mic'd up. So is it only that one play you didn't mic up? The NFL doesn't make any sense on this one. And, Myles Garrett has his claims, and Mason Rudolph has his claims, but there's one way to resolve the whole situation. Take the audio that we know the NFL has and release it. Then we know if Myles Garrett is out there making up lies, and we know if Mason Rudolph has the ability right now to sue him for libel, or for defamation because he's claiming he's a racist. Just release the audio. It's that simple, and it's all over. Of course, if you just forget about it and pretend it like we're just going to blame Myles Garrett, and then it's all over now. But, sticking your head in the sand like an ostrich doesn't force the NFL to deal with a race issue that it doesn't want to deal with, potentially. There's my rant on Mason Rudolph. Yeah, you knew this was coming. You had to know this was coming. I have very strong opinions about Mason Rudolph. Although I have friends who live in Rock Hill, South Carolina, where Mason Rudolph is from. And I know they'll be mad at me for dissing on Mason Rudolph, but I don't know. I
tried to read. I couldn't make a judgment one way or the other, but the
NFL has the audio on that. They have
out to both players, but
they claim they don't have the audio. It's real simple. Somebody's making one statement, somebody's saying another statement. Just release the audio, and we know who's telling the truth, and it's over with. The only reason you don't release the audio is there's something on the audio that would create a larger issue that the NFL does not want to deal with, namely a race issue or something else that we're not aware of, and therefore the audio has not been released and will never be released. And so I think Myles Garrett got a raw end of the deal on this, that I think what happened was we got something created for us as an audience. We had a villain handed to us, and then they punished the villain, and everyone felt like, oh, the NFL handled this great, when it was just a big show. Speaking of a big show, we're on to our final thoughts, Elliot. What are your final thoughts? I need to get off this Myles Garrett thing.
Well, now I'm just really thinking about going back and looking at the tapes, and I really hadn't thought about that. But I love Myles Garrett. I believe in Myles Garrett.
No, I think Myles Garrett's a fool, but whatever.
No, I don't think he is.
He can play football. He can play football, but I think he just does
I
some
think
dumb
he's
stuff.
the greatest player that the Browns have had in my lifetime. Well, okay, no, I think.
Okay, come on,
I
Elliot.
remember Jim Brown. Jim
Come
Brown
on,
is
Elliot.
the greatest player in my lifetime, but Myles Garrett is just awesome.
Yeah, Myles Garrett is good for what he does. He's going to be challenged this year to do something different. We'll see if he can
Oh,
adapt.
you're going to see something different, man. We had terrible support for Myles Garrett the past few years.
Mm-hmm.
This is not your father's Cleveland Browns, man. This is going to be different.
All right, so with that, I think we need to wrap up here.
Yeah, we went into double overtime today.
We did. We went into triple overtime. All right, so everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to Football, Philosophy, and Rocket Science, a Cleveland Browns podcast. Please like, subscribe, and tell all your friends to give a listen. You can follow Joel on Twitter at The Left Guard and Elliot at The Village Elliot.